Good morning and welcome to Real Religion. I'm Joseph Birch. I'm here alone today. Wanted to give an update on some current events in religion globally and hopefully clarification about current events, because I feel that the media outlets and their reporting are reporting a bit strangely. Essentially what's happening is there's a new book coming out, which I intend to read when it's released in March. It's called From the Depths of Our Hearts, and then there's a subtitle on the priesthood, celibacy. I don't remember the exact, I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's a book about essentially a defense of the practice of celibacy within the priesthood, within the Roman Catholic Church. And the authors of the book currently are listed as Robert Cardinal Sarah, well-known Roman Catholic cardinal, that's a high-ranking clergy official within the church. He's known for his, let's say, conservative stances on some of the issues that the church is a little divided on. And the co-author is Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, aka Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger. He was a previous pope, predecessor to the current Pope Francis, who resigned, was the first pope to resign in several hundred years. I think the last papal resignation was in 1294, but I could be wrong. It's around that time. The relationship between Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI and current Pope Francis was the subject of an Oscar-nominated film, The Two Popes. I've watched that. Very good film. Always love Anthony Hopkins. His portrayal of Pope Benedict XVI was very captivating, despite the fact that he made no effort to imitate a German accent. A typical Welsh-accented Anthony Hopkins, very recognizable, but suspension of disbelief was still no problem. Just a great actor. Anyway, the way it's being reported on currently in the media is that the two popes are now at odds. That Pope Francis is in the left, saying, oh, we've got to do away with celibacy in the priesthood, and Pope Benedict XVI, God's Rottweiler, the watchdog of traditional dogma, is over on the other side saying, no, we have to maintain celibacy for the priesthood. Always been that way, always will be that way. And the two are now in conflict. And it's led to a lot of debate about whether or not the right choices were made in allowing Benedict XVI to be called Pope Emeritus, to retain his papal name, whether he should have gone back to being Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger or former Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, whether he wields power still from behind the scenes. And it's such a controversy. As of yesterday when I'm filming this, which was January the 14th of 2020, word came down the line to the publisher from representatives of the Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI asking his name to be removed as co-author. The publisher said it's their understanding that he wrote, I believe, the introduction or an introduction, a chapter, at least one chapter of the book itself, and something in the closing as well, that it is a book of two authors collaborating to produce an original work, that Benedict is a co-author. So I don't know if his name will be removed or not. He supposedly asked for his name to be removed, apparently requested his name to be removed. On Amazon, where it's listed for pre-order, it's listed as Pope Benedict XVI and Robert Cardinal Sarah are listed as the authors, and that's how it appears on the cover. What is clear is that Cardinal Sarah is the author of the majority of the book, and that Benedict XVI is the co-author, or the secondary author. That seems to be clear at this point. What also seems to be clear is that representatives of Pope Francis are saying that he is not far to the left on the celibacy issue, that he is not ready to abolish celibacy for priests. What this is all framed as is during the recent big meeting about the Amazon and Catholic life in the Amazon region, there was some talk of allowing married men to become priests in remote regions where clergy are scarce. The Catholic Church as a whole is undergoing a mass shortage of priests, and the celibacy requirement presumably exacerbates that, because there are not a lot of young men who are dying to take a vow of celibacy. And in these remote regions, obviously the remoteness of the region, the size of the population exacerbates the shortage as well. So he said there are certain dependable, good Catholic guides who are married men in these regions. They're called viri probati, which is Latin, and these trusted men, these proven men, they can potentially become priests. Now, but Pope Francis has clarified in the past, and representatives of Pope Francis are clarifying now, he remains pro-celibacy in general, pro-exceptions in certain cases. Pope Benedict XVI, strongly pro-celibacy in general, but I want to mention, for those of you who might not know, the Catholic Church already allows married men to become priests in certain instances. The most prominent of which is if an Anglican or Episcopal priest converts to Catholicism. And in his tradition, he is a priest. In his tradition, he can be married. In Catholicism, he can become a priest. Because that's been his job, that's been his vocation, that's been his life's work and his calling. And it just so happened that in his tradition, he was allowed to also be married. And so there's an allowance made that he can now continue his work as a priest. After converting to Catholicism, he can undergo training to become a Catholic priest, despite the fact that he's married. There's also, what some people may not know, there are two rites of the Catholic Church, an Eastern and a Western, or a Latin rite and the Byzantine rite. The Byzantine or Eastern rite of the Catholic Church is very similar in praxis to the Eastern Orthodox Church, but it is loyal to the Pope, and it's part of the Roman Catholic Church. Within the Eastern Rite, there are married priests. So the Roman Catholic Church already allows married men to become priests in certain instances. Pope Francis seems to be in favor of expanding those instances, those exceptions, to include remote regions, such as portions of the Amazon region where priests are very short, to allow married men to become priests. No one is talking about allowing priests to get married. Well, some people are, but neither pope is. And they're not talking about widening the exceptions to, hey, any married man anywhere, he is eligible to become a priest. The discussion is, can we make one more exception, one more type of exception, in addition to the 2 or 3 conditions where exemptions are already made. So, it doesn't seem to me, based on my research, like the two are at odds. That seems like a media angle. This happens a lot with Catholicism. The media will take a story and run with it, and you can tell sometimes that the reporter is either not Catholic or not an expert in the history or the inner workings of the Catholic Church. I'm not an expert myself, but it seems like some people who are reporting on this have definitely done more research than others. I have read a good number of articles and responses to this, and some of them seem very informed, others seem a little underinformed, maybe like they were rushing to the press, so to speak, to get this published, and they needed an angle to make it interesting, and so they said, oh, the popes are in a fight, basically, and that's not the case at all. Whether or not Benedict it has interpreted Francis correctly, and whether or not he understands that Francis is at least presenting himself to be generally pro-celibacy, I'm not sure. It could be that the two popes believe themselves to be at odds, but based on their public statements, they don't seem to be at odds. You could infer or suspect that Pope Francis really wants to introduce increasingly more and more exemptions to the celibacy rule. But in general, they're all in agreement that the commitment to the church and the commitment to a wife and children they're both so absolute that it's very difficult for a priest, to balance the two of them, that one will inevitably rob from the other. The Catholic Church has asked for celibacy from priests of the Latin Rite for a number of centuries now, but it has not always been that way. There was a good millennium plus or so when there was no such rule, when married men could become priests and priests could marry, and then a rule of celibacy was imposed largely for pragmatic reasons, largely due to the concept that it was difficult to balance being a husband and a father to a family, and being a father, a priest, and being a shepherd to a parish, a congregation. There is some notion that celibacy is particularly sacred, but again, it seems to me that the main and the most compelling reason for the rule of celibacy is a practical matter rather than not. Biblically, of course, Peter the Apostle, St. Peter, who's credited with being the founder and the first pope of the Roman Catholic Church, was married. We know that because there's a story in the Gospel in the New Testament about his mother-in-law, where his mother-in-law was miraculously healed by Jesus, so he at least was married. He may have been a widower. I don't believe his wife actually appears in the story, so it's possible that he was either a married man or a widower. There are cases widowers are allowed to become priests still in the Catholic Church, but married men are currently not in the Latin Rite, except in certain cases. And Pope Francis appears to want to expand very slightly what those cases are when married men can become Roman Catholic priests of the Latin Rite. This is only cause for alarm in the Catholic community if you believe in the concept of a slippery slope, which it's taught as a fallacy, the slippery slope fallacy. It's taught as a logical fallacy, faulty reasoning, that there is no inherent slippery slope. Just because they make one more exception doesn't mean they'll inevitably make 100 more exceptions. It is possible that the Catholic Church will continue to trend more liberal than they have, and that more exceptions will be made. I personally believe, this is just speculative, but I personally speculate that more exceptions will be made in the coming years or next, let's say, 2 or 3 decades. I believe we're going to see multiple new exemptions made to the rule of celibacy. To my understanding, and this is important to note, the Pope could completely abolish the requirement for celibacy for priests of the Latin Rite. He could do that in one fell swoop. He could do that in one document or statement. He would just have to write out and say, we're no longer going to require that priests take vows of celibacy or vows of chastity, as it may be called within the church, and that would be the end of it. So Pope Francis has shown no interest in doing that, and Pope Benedict XVI obviously has should have no reason to believe that Pope Francis is interested in doing that, and really hasn't said that he does think that's going to happen. All he did was presumably co-author portions of a book by Robert Cardinal Sarah defending the blanket rule of celibacy for Catholic priests as good for a number of theological and practical reasons, and now apparently has asked that his name be removed from the book. I'm going to guess, again, this is my speculation, I'm assuming because of how controversial it's proven to be, that he doesn't want to cause controversy or cause scandal or cause it to look like he's at odds with the current reigning pope. So I hope this has been clarifying in terms of what's going on with the Catholic Church. Are the popes in a fight? Do we have rival papacies? No, it's not the Middle Ages again yet, They're not going to allow priests to get married, I don't think, anytime soon. It could happen, but I don't think it's going to happen within this papacy. I doubt it's going to happen within this decade. But if it does, I'll be sure to make a video where I eat my words on that and I explain, hey, I was wrong. Alright, so hopefully this is clarifying. Media, particularly American media, is biased and sensationalist and religiously uninformed. I don't know what to do with that, but yeah, the former Pope wrote a book. That's odd. Now he wants his name to not be on the book. That's odd too. Have a good one.